I'm Joseph Napier Sr. I'm a Youngstown resident. I was born originally in West Virginia. My mother brought me up here at a year of age. And this is my fair community. I've become an historian because I love the valley, I love the city I live in, and I enjoy telling stories and doing photography and videography as it applies to our history here in Youngstown. Yeah, the B&O Railroad, which of course stands for Baltimore and Ohio, is significant, first of all, because the folks that built the railway station saw Youngstown as a very important link in the whole map of the transportation system, if you will. Youngstown, back in 1926, when they built this facility, or when it was really up and running, of course it was built in 1905, but when it really got up and running with passenger traffic, this was a midpoint, if you will, between Baltimore itself and Youngstown and Washington, D.C., and Detroit, and Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. So Youngstown being centrally located as it played a major role, and I'm just happy that, I could tell the history about B&O Station. Yeah, the B&O in the beginning, of course, it was a passenger train station. We competed with 3 other stations in our fair community, of which all the other 3 were located downtown Youngstown. But the B&O train station itself was an important hub, as I mentioned, between Youngstown and Pittsburgh and Cleveland, in areas such as that. So when you look at the B&O station, first starting off as a passenger station, they got into freight, of course, and they made a lot of money there, so that came about as well. They actually built a freight house after the train station was built itself. And then it went on into where that train or passengers traffic started to wane somewhat, and they started to rely more on the freight traffic, getting goods around the country here and there. So that was a very significant role that it played as well. It went through the renovations in the early to mid 80s, and then it would ramp back up under the marker of Amtrak. And Amtrak would reestablish passenger traffic here too. It was limited, where it only took it to Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Chicago and areas like that. But nevertheless, and now of course it serves as a party center, an event center, and hosts weddings and parties all the time, and special events. Yeah, the flood in 1913 was very bad in that all the businesses in this whole area were flooded out. If you used to see old black and white photographs of the railway station, you would see that the water crested almost all the way to the rooftop. Following the flood of 1913, the tracks were elevated up to the second level of the building, matter of fact, and fearing another flood that would possibly could come again. As in our nations, or right here in Youngstown, the history of flooding happened 2 times in the city's history. Well, I tell them about the history of B&O, Baltimore and Ohio, the fact that it's there. It is located on the banks of the Mahoning River here, the southern banks of the Mahoning River. That it stood time. It lasted a great flood of 1913, for example. It persevered on through design changes with the railroad tracks itself that was pitched up to an elevation of about the second floor of the facility after the flood. And then it continued to go on. It received the extensive renovations. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And as we know then, it can't easily be torn down at all. In any efforts to renovate it, it has to be in keeping with the period and the date it was built, which was 1905. And it being here and located on the banks the way it is, it's a very aesthetically pleasing. And as the city was growing up around it, so to speak, there's a very important building in our community, a very important historical building. When you think of the 10 top structures in Youngstown, the B&O is one of them.